Good afternoon to one and all. How are you all doing out there? Everybody okay? Okay. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Owsley Brown, and I am one of the co-chairs of this year's Festival of Faiths. You know the title, Sacred Silence, Pathway to Compassion. We're so glad that you are all here. Amazingly enough, this is our third to last program. We have tonight and then we have tomorrow morning, but it is astounding to think that we're nearing the end of this section before the arrival of His Holiness tomorrow afternoon. And it feels, I guess, especially apt that we have this particular session this afternoon before us, which Sarah will introduce in just a minute. But I'll just say before she does, I'm personally extremely grateful to Marty Krasdy for making this possible and for making sure that we made this possible, and also to his wife Pamela. As you all know, we are beholden to lots of people in terms of making this event happen, and I would be remiss in not mentioning our mayor, at whose request this entire program was put together. We on our end feel completely grateful to him, not only for his inspired leadership, but also for asking us to do this, and it has been just amazing. Oh, this is helpful. Additionally, of course, we have many other members of the Louisville community that have historically and also very much this year been by our side in many ways, including as underwriters, starting with Brown-Forman and many others, including WFPNL and Louisville Public Media, the Ali Center, the Drepung Gomang Institute, which is hosting his Dalai Lama tomorrow, the City of Louisville, Fons Vitae, Compassionate Louisville, the Earth and Spirit Center, along with the Thomas Merton Center, and we are totally grateful to them. It gives me a special sense of pleasure to be standing next to Sarah Reed Harris, who along with Dr. Kathleen Lyons and Chris Wooten have anchored our office, which is now supported by an incredible group of people. But I would just like, since this has been the only chance to be at the podium with Sarah, to pay a special tribute to her, as she has really been an extraordinary hub by design, by decree, and I guess by way of your willing spirit and heart. But that's one thing to have a willing spirit and heart, and it's another thing to have extraordinary ability and capacity and a sense of tireless commitment that has just truly allowed this hub to be as good of a hub as we could ask for. So if you'll join me in applauding Sarah, I would be most grateful. A rare moment to put her on the spot. And now that you have been introduced to her, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome her to the podium to tell you more about our program.
Let me just say it's been an honor and a privilege working with a man of such vision and such commitment to this city. And I hope to continue to do this for a while. I am just so impressed with the level of leadership and opportunity that we have in the panel that we have before us today. These are the Dalai Lama Fellows. His Holiness the Dalai Lama personally funded the fund that provides the support for the work that these college students are doing. And I look forward to hearing on your behalf and speaking on your behalf to what they have to inspire us and lead us forward as we go from learning about the pathway to compassion to actually engaging compassion. So thank you for being here. You inspire all of us.
And we have once again, now for the third, or is it the fourth time? I think the third time, although it's been much more than that in Radio Land, our distinguished and just marvelous moderator, Jonathan Bastian. And I think you get to take it away. Who's going to ring the, Jonathan's going to be the silence bell ringer?
Yeah, I think two of our guests.
You're going to figure that out, okay. Take it away, Jonathan Bastian. Thank you.
Thank you, Owsley, and everybody at the Festival of Faith. Thank you all for coming out. Just a few quick word, or one really quick one before I hand it over to two of the program directors here who are going to have a word, Vidisha and Christian, and then you're going to get a chance to hear from the fellows each. I'll ask them questions. Please prepare your questions as well. We have a lot to get through today, so we'll try and keep moving. Very quickly, I don't know if anybody's been following the news or been reading Time magazine. There's been a lot of interesting things written about what's called the millennial generation. A lot of that I think most of us here encompass right now, and sometimes they can get an interesting rap, let's say, right now. Time magazine called them, unfortunately, the me generation. But I want to bring this up right now because if there was ever a moment to disprove most of what's been written, there was never an opportunity to exhibit, I think, the absolute best qualities of this rising generation. It's probably going to happen here in the next 45 minutes. So it's a privilege also to hear your stories, to be up here with you today. So as we continue along, to my right, Vidisha Banerjee. She's a program director at the Dalai Lama Fellows, where she wears many hats, including developing the Head, Heart, and Hands curriculum, designing the Ethical Leadership Assembly, coaching fellows, and evaluating program impact. She's from Kolkata, India, and also Lawrence, Kansas. I also want to say perhaps the most important thing is that she has been to Louisville before in 2003 for the Kentucky Derby, where she won $60 and mud wrestled in the infield. Welcome. Christian Simamora, just to the right here, is also a program director, as well wears many hats in the organization, managing marketing operations, finance for the Dalai Lama Fellows. After graduating from NYU in 2000, Chris, a New York native, taught 5th grade in the South Bronx through Teach for America and eventually joined Teach for America's staff as a recruitment director. These guys have tremendous biographies. I'm cutting them short by about half right here, but I want you to hear from them. So please, we look forward, take the stage, and also it sounds like you're going to lead us through a moment of silence as well. So welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to start with a quote from Thomas Merton because I love that you in Louisville are having this whole Festival of Faiths that is in part inspired by Merton's meeting with the Dalai Lama. So, negative silence blurs and confuses our identity, and we lapse into daydreams or diffuse anxieties. Positive silence pulls us together and makes us realize who we are, who we might be, and the distance between these two. Hence, positive silence implies a disciplined choice, and what Paul Tillich called the courage to be. In silence, we recognize the need to be at home with ourselves in order that we may go out to meet others, not just with a mask of affability, but with real commitment and authentic love.
And at this point, I'd like to invite all of us to take 15 seconds. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, but by all means, you can also keep them open. And let's just ponder those words and contemplate them for a bit before we move into the session itself. And I'm going to invite you back. And can everyone hear me okay? Great. So I'm going to share a very quick story, a personal story, that will then bridge into a story about Dalai Lama Fellows that hopefully will give you some sense of the work that's happening here. And Vidisha will also share a story as well very quickly. So I'm from New York, a New York native. My mom is from Puerto Rico. My dad is from Indonesia. And they met in Coney Island, waiting for the Cyclone, the famous roller coaster there. So my dad, who was a bit of a ladies' man at the time, approached my mother and began to swoon her with words in Spanish. And my mom was taken aback and really enthralled with him because here was this Chinese guy speaking Spanish. She had no idea where Indonesia was. And from that meeting grew a courtship and a marriage, and then myself and my sister came. But it was really interesting growing up because I think being in an interracial, intercultural marriage was very difficult for them. And instantly, my sister and I understood that we embodied two cultures, and that's why we came up with the name Indo-Rican when people asked us where we were from. But the interesting thing around those difficulties was the criticisms they would lob at each other's culture sometimes not realizing that in criticizing each other, they actually criticized us. The learning from that is, A, keeping multiple perspectives. I found that to be very important for me as I grew up, and then also sort of a personal calling to be a bridge. Now fast forward to last week. I was on a Fellows Circle call, and these are calls where we have 3 to 5 fellows on a video call, and they facilitate and lead the call to talk about project challenges, to share successes, to think through ideas, and also to be vulnerable. And one of our fellows, Samir, who's from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, was speaking about something he was very proud of, which is the creation of a Dalit pedagogy. Now, the Dalit caste is the lowest class in India, and he himself is a member of the Dalit caste. But he has been called, he feels this mission to bring forth this pedagogy that focuses on using critical thinking to question long-held assumptions about gender and caste. But what was really remarkable was that Kia, who is on this call as well, our Spelman College Fellow, who's working with teenage mothers in Atlanta, was so enthralled and so excited and asked if she could see this curriculum so that she could integrate it into her work. And then at the same time, our fellow from Stanford, Morgan Duffy, who works with children with disabilities in Indonesia, was also excited and wondered how this Dalit pedagogy could inform her work. And what's remarkable is that I see before me this manifestation of the value of interconnectedness, of the reality of interconnectedness, this bridging. And if we're going to face some of the really daunting challenges before us in the 21st century, it's really important to bridge culture and religion and nationality and to transcend those so that we can come together and find common ground as a species. And I was really moved by that experience on the call, and I wanted to share that with all of you because I think it gives a glimpse into the work that's going on. And now I'll pass it over to Badisha so she can share a story as well.
Thanks, Chris. I want to start with a story about my grandmother-in-law. She's 95 years old. Her name is Dorothy Corvino. And for 60 years, she lived in Long Branch, New Jersey, on the seashore. Her husband served in World War II, and she was just a Jersey Shore girl all her life. A couple of months ago, she was displaced from her home because of Superstorm Sandy. She had freezers filled with pork loins and all kinds of good food. She grew up in the Depression era, so she's somebody who really had bunkered down, and her home was her oyster. And so to be displaced from that and have to move to Southern Illinois, all in the space of a week, to have to sell her house at a loss, brought something home to me, which is a subject that I had studied in school, climate change. A subject that I thought only happened to some islander hanging out on his hammock somewhere in some Pacific island that's slowly being crumbled because the sea is eating away at it. It brought home to me that, whoa, this can happen in my family. And it made me really think about how do we broaden the boundaries of compassion across space and time so that we're both able to be more compassionate to those immediately around us, but also to those who are very distant from us, maybe those who haven't been born yet, maybe those who live in parts of the world that we can't really see, even though what we do, our actions, the cars that we drive, or the food that we eat may very, very directly impact their livelihoods and their well-being. And one thing I've really learned from Grammy is resilience. She came to visit us a couple of years ago on the beach, and she had an all-terrain wheelchair. Now, I had heard of all-terrain vehicles, but never a wheelchair that went on the beach. So, that sense of resilience is something that actually each of the Dalai Lama Fellows also really makes me hopeful about. And the sense of community building and, working through difficult conversations. Actually, at the place where the rubber meets the road, choosing to engage compassionately, not just thinking about it, in the sort of peace and silence of your own room, but really using that and using different tools and skills that we teach through our curriculum in order to manifest that more compassionate and loving community that is inclusive. I want to tell another story very, very quickly, and it was actually about the kind of coaching that we do with our fellows. Rachel and Hillary, whose projects I hope you'll hear a lot about, have been working in Kentucky, inspired by David's work in Kentucky. And they've all been working in Harlan County, which I don't know that much about, but one thing that really struck me was that Rachel and Hillary seemed really committed to working at the intersections of peace, justice, and ecology. And when they first started out with their project, they said, oh, we want to build a community garden, and we have the perfect spot, the sweet spot. This is where it should be. It's because in this particular piece of land, the rich, the poor, the black, the white, they all intersect on this piece of land. So if we build a garden there, that's it, like check. We will have resolved our desire to work at the intersection of peace, justice, and ecology. Okay, so I was like, great. A month went by, and we do monthly Skype calls with each of our fellows. So I was talking to the two of them. So what's happening with the garden? And Hillary's like, well, there are a lot of kids that are coming. We painted them with body paint, and they went back, but they aren't really, like the garden part isn't really taking off. People aren't really coming. So it's like, oh, okay. And then they were like, but a neighbor has stepped forward, and he's going to bring like hundreds of pounds of topsoil in his truck to our garden. And I was like, really? But have you talked to other community members? Like, is there a different place the garden could be, maybe? And they were like, yeah, actually, some of the people that we have really built trust and credibility with in the community have suggested that we speak to the school principal, Sheila Hall. And I was like, oh, the school, interesting. Is there a possibility that you could have your garden there? They were like, oh, I don't know, we need to think about it, but our neighbor is coming with all this topsoil. And I was like, oh, well, maybe this is a good time for a moment of silence, and maybe we hang up on the Skype call. Anyway, weeks later, I find out Rachel and Hillary have actually decided to move the garden, which is a huge enterprise. And there's been an amazing upwelling of community support for them to be able to do that. And everything that unfolded since then has just been so deeply inspiring. So I'll leave it up to them to tell you more details. But thank you all for being with us. And we really look forward to the Q&A part of this, because we would love for you to share with us ways to magnify the ripple effects of what we're doing, and to look for ways that we can collaborate with work that you all are doing.
Well, thank you both. That was fantastic. Thank you. And now we get to hear from the fellows. So why don't we just start? David, why don't you begin and just remind us your name, the story, and we'll move down the line.
Good, thank you. My name is David Fisher. I graduated from Oberlin College a year ago and was a Dalai Lama Fellow starting in 2011. It's a joy to be here this afternoon. The project that I launched that you alluded to is Interfaith Appalachia, and a quick story that testifies to it was a Buddhist student who was also an environmentalist working alongside a third-generation coal miner and evangelical preacher who gained through that experience unexpected insight into compassion in his own journey. So I look forward to sharing more as we go through the rest of our conversation.
So my name is Titus Chirchir. I am originally from Kenya, but currently I'm a student at Amherst College. I will be graduating next weekend. I can't wait. By the way, if you hear something beating, it's my heart. This is one of the largest crowds I've addressed, and yeah, so bear with me. My project is based in Kenya, and it's called Project for Environmental and Agricultural Sustainability. It's a project that tries to reforest Kenya, which has been affected by, with the population increase, people have been encroaching forest land, and the government has been trying to evict them. So my project literally brings the forest to the people. We raise seedlings, and then we distribute it to the people to plant them in their own lands. And I thought it was just going to be a project to give trees to the people, but it ended up being this process of compassion building, interconnectedness. Like I learned a lot from the village people. And hopefully during this talk, I will be able to share more about my experiences. Thank you for having us here.
Hi, my name is Rachel Manning. I'm a student at Oberlin College in Ohio. I will be a rising senior. And I became a Dalai Lama Fellow last year in 2012. Hillary and I co-founded the Mountain Garden Initiative, which is a food justice project located in the Appalachian Mountains of Kentucky. This project aims to promote environmental education and gardening skills at a local elementary school, as Badisha mentioned.
Hi, I'm Hillary Neff, and I also became a Dalai Lama Fellow in 2012. I'm graduating from Oberlin next week, 9 days, so I'm looking forward to that. But yes, as Badisha and Rachel mentioned, the Mountain Garden Initiative has been a really exciting part of Rachel and my lives recently in the past few years, so I'm looking forward to hopefully sharing some exciting updates in the rest of the panel.
Hi everyone, my name is Agustin Dungu. I'm also originally from Kenya, and I became a Dalai Lama Fellow in 2011. I graduated from Amherst College a year later. I started the Amani Seed Project to address perennial ethnic violence between the Kikuyu community and the Kalenjin community in the Rift Valley region of Molo. That's where my dad's side of the family comes from. And it's been a great learning period for me, a growing period, and especially also, a way to build a community with all the fellows and Chris and Badisha, and now I hope with everyone who is here as well.
Thank you, guys. Amazing the connection here in Kentucky. This was not a planned thing. It just really so happened that this amazing work was happening in Harlan County. So why don't we start there? David, it began with the work you were doing in Appalachia. So I want you to continue the story, and then I want to hear from Rachel and Hillary how you heard about what he was doing and the ideas that sprung from that. So pick up from where you left off.
Sure, just so tease that back to a Genesis moment. Yeah, great.
There you go.
So at Oberlin, I was an environmental studies and Jewish studies double major, and about a bunch of us basically were sitting around one day working on figuring out what we could do for an alternative fall break trip, which we already had the funding for, and we were doing in kind of a disorganized way in various other places. And we realized maybe we could take a group of religiously more liberal, sort of diverse students to work in Harlan County with evangelical ministries for a week and just see what we might learn through that experience and challenge our own understanding of the coal industry, of religion in the States, of politics in our country. And so we went for a week, found a ministry that was excited to take us, and the stories that began to flow out of that week, like the one I shared, which was from a later week, but similar stories like that, just got people energized, and we've sort of maintained trips like this through Oberlin that Hillary and Rachel have taken on, and myself, I've gotten to branch out and work with other colleges and universities and build that work out. And we're now working on a high school youth camp, which will bring together youth from Greater Boston and Central Appalachia, mostly Harlan, in the summer, kind of like a red state, blue state camp that'll be based up in Boston this summer. So it's just a little bit of a genesis story of how we got here.
So Hillary and Rachel, you had obviously heard about this work going on, also Oberlin students. So again, pick up and talk about stories you were hearing from him and how it began to affect your work and your ideas.
Sure. So we actually attended these service trips. Rachel became a leader after David did, and I became a leader after they were leaders. So we were all leading these service trips down to the area. And Rachel and I started getting to know local food ministers at the food pantry and started throwing around the idea of a garden because we'd heard many people talk about how gardening was a huge part of life in this area. And this is all taking place in what was the largest coal camp in the world at one point. So there's a history of gardening in the general area, but we were in a more condensed area. There's less room to garden, and a lot of the land has been bought up by housing projects. and for other extenuating circumstances, convenience, what have you, there's less and less gardening going on in this specific town. So even if people's grandfathers are still gardening out in the area, there's not as much going on here. So we launched the garden, and as Felicia said, our plans changed a few months in, but it's been a really amazing experience to get to know community members in this area, and the garden has really taken off with the local elementary school behind us.
Hillary, anything you want to add?
Yeah, one of our original motives was to have a community garden to provide another source of fresh produce in the area. So it kind of evolved to be more of an educational project for kids, but it still surrounded the idea of sustainable food systems and sustainable agriculture. So our original idea is still consistent, but just the mode of doing it has changed.
Can you three talk about the geography of the place, the people of the place, and perhaps some of the similarities you had dealing with these communities, which are very isolated in their own ways? And what did you encounter?
That's a great question. People often ask me, like, when I'm there, how did you find us?
Right.
I was just to paint a picture. When I went back, I originally had funding just to go for a summer, and then not really sure what was going to come the following year. Just going to do a couple of service projects like what we had that first time. But I was living in, for a month, an evangelical mission center. And I was the first Jew who had done that. And it was a new experience for all of us. And what I discovered actually through that was, in my view, it had felt that, well, this region is isolated. And as soon as I got there, I realized we in Oberlin, we in the communities that I'm from, we are also isolated. We have not been hearing these stories. And my own perspective was kind of out of check with reality. I was an environmental science major, out of check with reality in coal country, people who are more affected on a daily basis today by these issues. So I began to see it kind of back and forth that way too, through that experience.
Yeah, I would just add that we learn a lot about urban poverty in this country, but rural poverty is often entirely overlooked. And I want to stress that I've heard poverty talked about in a way that I'd like to share, which is that it's not a lack of money, it's a lack of resources. And so recognizing that as college students, we are very fortunate to have a certain amount of privilege, and that we have access to these resources, that it's not, we do hard work as individuals, but that it's the resources we can bring, and it's the way we bring them, which is trying to be as conscientious as possible, of course knowing that we make mistakes in that process. But this is an area that just captivated me because I really didn't know a lot about it. A lot of people don't know a lot about rural poverty in the States. So yeah, I think being able to educate other Oberlin students in that process was really moving for me. And then also on the more logistical side, it is a remote place. Getting infrastructure there for the garden can be difficult. So currently our friend Elmer brings soil up that's chemical-free from Knoxville, Tennessee. So we're 2.5 hours from any big city. So it is difficult, but people in Harlan County, I can't typify what individual communities are like, but they help each other out, and they've helped us out. It's the only way this project has happened.
Hillary, anything else you want to add?
I wanted to just talk briefly about another aspect of our project that Hillary touched on. I really enjoyed bringing other Oberlin students to the area, and we continue doing this at least twice a year through the service trips that were mentioned earlier. So this can integrate some home repair and also garden work with our project. And the Oberlin students that visit the area really get a lot out of going, and it's been really nice to share that with other students.
Thank you. Well, let's move to Africa. This is amazing. You both attended Amherst, both from Kenya, correct? Right. So especially thinking about these gardens, there's been this explosion, I think, in ecology, in gardens here, and in food issues in the United States, particularly. When you were beginning to, or should I say, walk me through the thinking of then bringing something that really is burgeoning here, this issue of food and seeds, to Africa, did you think that Kenya itself was also dealing with similar issues, that we had to kind of rejuvenate the ecology, the agriculture there? Augustine, why don't you start?
I think there's definitely a lot in terms of the interconnectedness of the food or agricultural situation in the U.S. and say Kenya, where I'm from, and I would say that being Kenyan, having grown up in Kenya all my life, then coming to the U.S., I really saw myself as an agent of learning and knowledge that I could then bring back to my own country. And so really for 3 years from my freshman year through junior year, at which point I became a Dalai Lama Fellow, I had always seen something new that I could take home, and anything that I saw that would work, whether it's food, it's agriculture generally, commerce, trade, interreligious interactions, race and ethnic conversations and things like that, the way they are all handled here, I could always see myself learning something from that and then bringing it back to my own country. So Dalai Lama Fellows really to me was an opportunity to, in a way, turn all this knowledge that I felt that I had absorbed and go back to my country, go back to my community, and find an issue that I could address that would mean so much to me, but also would be a way that I could feel that I'm not only giving back, but bringing back something that I've learned from outside. So my project, by definition, responds to the agricultural issues in the area, in the sense that I work with the youth, and I used agribusiness in order to enable young people from two communities that don't see eye to eye to engage with each other, learn from each other, work together, and cooperate over a period of time. So that through agribusiness or addressing the agricultural problem, you're also addressing the broader ethnic integration question here. And so it's really, again, the interconnectedness of issues where the rubber meets the road. That's where we've seen that I can be an agent of change, and that's where, again, my project and all the other projects that you're hearing from the other fellows tie in a way.
Yeah. Titus, why don't you pick up here, because you're working also in Kenya, and give us more background on what you've been up to as well.
Yeah, that's the question you ask about, like the interconnectedness of human needs. Like what we all do, we try to we try to make the human needs more available to all of us, like food. We have cleaner air in terms of ecology. So it's my project deals with tree planting. We basically raise seedlings in seed beds, and then we give it to the farmers to plant in their pieces of land. But at the heart of it is the compassion. We try to bring the different cultures. Even in a small village, I realized when I was doing my project, there are different kinds of people. They are the politicians, they are the drunkards, they are you have different religions, you have different things. And I realized that from my first meeting, when I started my project, I invited 14 members of the community so that we could organize. And then I realized that from that small group, it was very diverse. Each one of us has their own different way of thinking, different ways of dealing with problems. And it was just amazing to see how these people transformed and how all the ideas merged to show that they all of them wanted the same thing. They all wanted their basic problems solved, and all of them were basically, as the Dalai Lama says, seeking happiness. It's all we seek. So my project initially was just to raise trees, give it to the people, reforest the area. But as I went through it, as I was planning it, I realized that the people also need a sustainable food industry. By giving them trees, it means they are sacrificing part of their land, to plant trees instead of raising their normal subsistence crop. So I integrated a portion of sustainable agriculture, like seminars, where they get taught about like new trends in agriculture, like greenhousing, using like organic manure, and it was just like amazing to see how the people develop. And from Amherst College, we have like we have a diverse group of people we have people from up to, I think, 52 nationalities. So from that, I've been able to from the interactions, I've been able to get to learn about people's cultures, how they deal with these basic problems, and be able to form, let's say, an ultimate, I won't say we are there yet, but we are still working on it, on a way in which we could form a solution to some of these world problems.
What was the dynamic like personally for you two? Because
Yeah.
you grew up there, but you chose to leave the country to go to Amherst, an amazing school, and then you came back to Africa again. How was that? How were you treated when you came back to then try and interact with the communities again? Was it with open arms? Whether it was skepticism?
Well, I think that was a big learning experience for me. In my application to become a Dalai Lama Fellow, I had a vision, and that's really what I put on my paper. That is what Chris and Bidisha said. Yeah, here you have a vision. Let's work together. Let's see you go and execute it. But the moment I got to the country, spent 2 days with my parents, then left to go to the communities where I was going to work, I quickly realized that there are much broader issues that I had to deal with. For example, dependency. We have a huge, I would say, service industry that, aid coming from abroad goes into the community. So people in the community already, they see, okay, where are you? Or who are you? Augustine, you grew up here, yes. You're coming from where? The United States? Okay, bring the money. So that became something that I had to deal with right from day one. And the way I found that I could go around that was to partner with a local institution, which then would create access as well as legitimacy. And so I immediately started a partnership with Baraka Agricultural College, which trains farmers on best practices in agriculture, and they really became the vehicle of accessing the community, and not just in terms of starting that conversation, but also being a fellow, as I was also a student at Amherst College. So when I came back, I had a partner on the ground who was helping to sustain the project. Yeah. And eventually, the story turned out that I eventually ended up creating another partnership with the Center for African Development and Security, which is a London-based NGO. And again, the idea here is that as much as I need access on the ground, I also need access to further resources and ways to further the work that I'm doing. And so partnership, again, became a way to do that, by partnering with CAD. So, but quite a learning opportunity, yeah.
Absolutely.
Going back to Kenya after being in the US was pretty interesting for me, but it was less challenging compared to Augustine, because I was going back to the village where I grew up. Wow. So it was easier to interact with the people, but they still had the expectations that I had changed. Most of them expected me to have forgotten the native language, and it had been just 3 years. So the first thing I did when I went there was to make sure that I spoke the native language to the people. Because whenever they met me, people started saying, "How are you?" instead of saying "Yomune," like the native way of greeting you. So the first thing, they had the expectations. They expected me to come with these American ideas, Americanized way of interacting with people, But after realizing that, I just tried to blend in, and it just took a week knowing the dynamics there and everything. Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't as challenging as Augustine put it for me.
Well, we're going to open it up to the audience. I'm going to have just one more question, and I want to hear from all 5 of you, or whoever would like to just address it. You've gotten to know each other now. You know each other's stories here. Kenya, Harlan County, what are you guys learning from each other along the way? Where are you seeing this bridge of interconnectedness in agriculture and ecology? Does anybody want to pick up?
Actually, I found it really valuable to have like a similar focus. I talked to Titus, and I find it really helpful because we both are working for the idea of agricultural sustainability. We just have different projects in different places. So I see there's a lot of room for collaboration. And yeah.
Rachel, can you talk a little bit about your work this summer? With Mama Hope.
Oh, yeah, this summer. So I'm going to be interning with an organization called Mama Hope, which strives to start school gardens, kind of like the one Hillary and I started, but they partner with institutions and organizations in countries in Eastern Africa, including Rwanda and Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania. So I called the director of the organization and just wanted to know if there was room for us to sort of partner our gardens. And he was really excited about it. So I'm going to be working with him and the postgraduate fellows they have working on the ground there to sort of collaborate on a curriculum that can be used in both gardens, or all of the gardens. So I'm excited. It will involve a lot of research, but I think it'll be a really good cross-cultural exchange between all the kids that are involved in these school gardens, and a really valuable asset.
And I think not only are we connected to the fellows through, making our projects, happen in both Harlan County and Kenya, but also through the circle calls. That has been something that's really meaningful to me. My circle call is with Alberta in Ghana, Jay in India, and Chris in San Francisco. I'm usually either in Oberlin or in Harlan County, but I remember talking about teacher investment and being like, well, we have these plans and we have this garden, but how do we make sure that the teachers we work with really, that they're on the same page with us, that the communication is working well? And I just remember getting support from Alberta and Jay and Chris has been so helpful because this project is something that is so personal to us, but that I don't want to go around talking to everybody at school about. We have other things to worry about. And students our age going through the same process of trying to balance these projects and trying to really make sense of working in communities that may or may not be our own, getting that kind of support. And it's not even always technical support. It's just hey, you can do this. You're nervous, we're nervous, we're gonna do it, and we're gonna meet back up in July at the Ethical Leadership Assembly, and we're gonna hug each other, and it's all gonna be okay. It's been a really meaningful part of it for me.
Yeah, I think what I could mention with regards to the question is 2-3 months ago, I got a call from David. I currently work at Ashoka, which is a nonprofit based in DC that works or leads in the social entrepreneurship field. And David said, hey, I'm interested in Ashoka. I've heard about the work that they do, and could we just set up a time to talk about how I could or, could potentially in the future be involved with Ashoka. I said, yeah, sure. So we set up a time and we had a really good conversation. Oftentimes it's, I would say, not the opportunity to respond to someone even within the group that, needs access or needs information about something, but it's also for me a way to reflect on my work and the next step that I've taken. So when David gets to also reflect back that Ashoka is quite a good step for me, from Dalai Lama Fellows as a next step, then I was able to internalize and say this was actually a good decision for me to take. And so it's really that kind of balancing that I would say creates a kind of a back and forth that ensures that this journey that we took on from day one continues through even when we move on to other jobs, we graduated from college, we are able to then keep reflecting, with each other back and forth. So that has been a very valuable part of the experience as well. So,
I would pick up there also. A lot of what's most valuable, as Augustine said, is having people that I know I can trust with the work. Your earlier question was about isolation and cultural difference. There are so many challenges to this kind of work, and it is powerful and transformative and is very, very good work. But it can be very challenging, and we can wonder sometimes, what if this goes wrong? What if I don't hold all these pieces together just right, and something totally unintended happens? And it requires really, to hold that trust with people, requires them to really understand what those pieces look like. And when the cultural differences are so significant, it's invaluable to have conversation partners who are familiar with the different kinds of folks we're bringing together. An example of an interfaith project that went terribly awry is relatively recent, from a handful of years ago, the Park 51 Community Center in southern Manhattan, which was unfortunately branded as the Ground Zero Mosque. They had a lot of good ideas, and they didn't put the pieces together quite right, and then a lot of people took advantage of what they did. And a lot of us in interfaith work look to stories like that sometimes and say, they thought they had it all figured out just right, and then, the result was exactly the opposite of what they intended, which was to bring different religious communities together and honor the history of pluralism in America. So to be able to have other fellows I can work with and just know are there at the touch of a phone call, just a touch of a button, is invaluable in terms of feeling confident to move forward on a daily basis.
Yeah, I can't start to imagine my last year without the Dalai Lama Fellowship. Like the kind of connections that I've developed between us as a group, and especially with the project directors. Chris has been particularly very helpful to me as a reference. Throughout the course of my project, I've had roadblocks. I've had points where I say, okay, this is not going to work. But Chris has helped me reflect back and conjure a solution out of it. Even if I can't even imagine how he does it. Yet he hasn't been to Kenya or anywhere, but he still manages to give me some very useful advice. And I can't imagine doing such without the help of the fellows. And Augustine, when I started my project, he was very useful as a reference. We could meet in the school dining hall, and then he could give me advice on how to go about things. So the connections we've developed as a group has been it goes beyond the projects itself. We discuss things about life, philosophy. During our circle calls, we have themes which we get to reflect about many things, not just our projects. So I think it's been a very, very enriching experience, and hopefully it will go on for many more years and many more such things come up. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, let's open it up to the audience here. We have a few microphones on the way in here, and why don't we start right up front?
Well, I'm so impressed with all of you. You're so young and you've done so many things. Obviously, your mentors are a huge part. You're a big part for each other. I'd like you to roll back to when you first found out you were going to be a fellow, and what was the preparation you had before you started?
Can I tell a funny story here? So there was I'm not really supposed to tell this story, but there was a fluke in the communications within Oberlin when I received the word that I had been awarded the opportunity. And I was in Israel studying abroad at the time at a kibbutz that brought together Israelis, Palestinians, and Christians, Muslims, Jews, and internationals for environmental science work. And I get this email, and at first I thought it was a joke because my roommate had a habit of emailing me like gag fellowships, trying to get me to think that I had been like awarded things. Because I was working so hard on this project, and then there was this opportunity that came, and the preparation really was phenomenal. I mean, we had an ELA, an Ethical Leadership Assembly in California at the time before our fellowship year began, and reading before that, and one-on-ones and group meetings and workshops within that, and to imagine the transition between that kibbutz I just described and Harlan County, Kentucky, without that ELA in the middle that I had, impossible. I would have struggled a lot more, and I struggled a lot. To have that toolkit and that network and that support from Vidisha in place was an essential transition for me to feel like I had the toolkit I needed to begin the work, and the grounding that I needed, and the support that I needed. Yeah.
And I think in a similar way, I actually never asked David where he got the news from. I got the news when I was studying abroad in London, in the UK. I was at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and for me, my college, Amherst, served as the stepping stone to really come back into this moment that, I'm a study abroad student, and then I have to suddenly think about not just summer plans, but plans for the next academic year. I will be a senior. I am an international student. I have to figure out very many questions about the end of my college career. So what I did was to just come back to my college, and we also have, as part of the process, you have to have a faculty advisor. So I met with my advisor, and he really did actually spend countless hours with me trying to figure out, okay, how do you integrate this work that you're going to be doing over the next year with your academic and personal life? And so having that reference point as, within the college, where even after the summer I went to Kenya, did the project, came back to college, having a person in the faculty who understood not just my professional interest, but also my academics and the sense of being a senior, that really helped me to be able to sort of make that transition and to see this not just as a daunting challenge, but as an opportunity that I could integrate into my work, academic work, that, for that matter. So that was a big part of the program that helped so much.
Yeah, like my two colleagues here, I got my news while studying abroad at Amherst College. So yeah, I first of all, I didn't believe the news because I had interacted with other applicants and their projects were very impressive. But at the same time, I was glad I got it because Kenya at the time was facing a challenge. With the increase in population, people were encroaching forest land and then clearing the land out. And then the government, as a way to solve the problem, was kicking out the people and not really resettling them elsewhere. So this project was kind of like an essential thing to do, because instead of just kicking the people out of their lands, this project was going to give the people the trees, so they plant in their land, so they still exist with the trees there. So I was very happy to get the project because it gave me a way to implement some of the ideas I had, because ideas, as with the head, heart, and hands model, you could have the idea in the head or the passion in the heart, but without the actions in the hands, which was made possible by the Dalai Lama Fellowship grant. It meant that I could implement my ideas, and I felt, I don't know if I should say it, I felt powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Empowered, yeah, I would say. Yeah.
We'll go to a second question.
I'm from Appalachia. In fact, I'm from very near Harlan. I'm from Middlesboro, which is, you may have been there. That used to be a bigger town. And I so much appreciate your going there. It's a third world country. That's why many of us left Eastern Kentucky, is because we felt there were no opportunities for us. And to have an impressive group like you to go in there with your hearts and your minds open to that area is so touching. It's so gratifying. And my question is, will you be preparing any sort of a document that sort of clears the way for other people to have understanding? Because you can't just go into that area. I mean, everything from their accent like that, and understanding what they say and how they speak, and the customs. I mean, you're in snake handling country too. But do you plan to have any sort of a put together of information and a story? This is a fabulous story. Do you plan to put that together that would be a wonderful story to hand over to other people? I think it would make a book, a play, whatever.
Well, I think my favorite part about the service trips that we run, of bringing Oberlin students down to this place, is that we let it speak for itself. I think that I've learned so much from working in Harlan County, but that it's not my right or my decision to share that knowledge necessarily. I love bringing people to the area and exposing people to, first of all, the nicest people they've ever met, and second of all, a level of poverty they've never seen. So I think sharing those experiences in person is so important, although I can't bring all of you to Harlan County here today. So trying to just tell stories about the work that we do is so important, and I love telling those stories through the kids we work with. So one girl, Michaela, she was very excited about this garden project from the start, and so on our fall trip, we had a few Oberlin students with us, and we're out working in the garden, and I was making her, I was like assigning her to different assignments with rotating groups. So she was raking leaves that day, she was picking up trash, and she was weeding. So these aren't things that are necessarily that fun, but she loved it, and she was getting her hands dirty, and at the end of the day, she said, I love gardening. And I said, why do you love gardening? Like, what about it? I love it too. She said, gardening's really important because it brings people together. And that was it. That was enough for me. If people can hear that story, maybe they can't go to Harlan County, but they can know Michaela and know that the work that we're doing is hopefully bringing people together.
Yeah, one thing about our project that's kind of unique is that we have a very personal relationship with the teacher that we're working at the school. And I think that's been why it's been so successful so far. And so I think in the future, to continue that kind of relationship, the people who lead trips to that area to work on the garden, in my mind, should have at least been there once and have some kind of background knowledge of the area. And when we lead trips of people there, we always have like an information session where we've shown them parts of movies and documentaries about the area, and give them some idea of their religious background and the political background. And we just want to minimize any like conflict or offense of any kind. And we're just there to learn and to be observers and to give any resources that people feel are necessary. So it's really important to make sure the people we bring there have that knowledge and attitude as well. We're not coming in to like change people's lifestyles for them or anything like that.
I think that's a fantastic answer. And this is a very important question. What do we do with the connections we have to make this work possible for others? And the personal relationships that form are really like a key ingredient. And then you are also asking, what are the resources that we can create so people might be able to envision what it would be like to step into one of those relationships, maybe with a collection of stories. And how could we guide them there with a curriculum, perhaps? So Rachel and Hillary's project is Mountain Garden Initiative, and you could say People like them are what I, oops there, what I would consider my project. And I'm still doing this work full time of Interfaith Appalachia. And we've created a curriculum for our alternative break program, which through its pilot and its fully operational year this year, reached about 60 students. And we're working with other groups in the region, like the Appalachia Service Project, to see if we can expand the use of our curriculum into a broader regional player. We'll see how that goes. The conversation is ongoing through the summer, towards next fall. But we also have a storybook we're creating, a journal that we're publishing at the end of this month, sending to the press on Monday. So if you're curious, a shameless little plug, you can find it on our website. There's a brief form to order a copy, and it's also available as a download. And these kinds of stories, coupled with curriculum resources and things like that, are really, I think, a really important part of the bridge. And Ryan is one of my colleagues from the area in Harlan, who's in the audience today. And we were just batting ideas back and forth in the car about how we can continue to develop these materials into the summer and continue them as sort of a living document. Because as you might imagine, they're challenging to hone in on how to do it best. So
I feel like our conversation is only beginning right now, and I hate to say it, we've reached the end of our time limit here. So as is the beautiful tradition in this festival, why don't, Medisha, will you lead us in a moment of silence before we say goodbye?
Sure, and I'd actually like to invite the Kenyan Fellows to say a word in Swahili that we can contemplate as we're doing the moment of silence.
I will say Amani, which is also the word for my project, Amani Seed Project. Amani means peace in Swahili.
Amani, thank you.
Well, with all of the news that has been going on in the world, this has been such an honest delight to know what good is going on right now among some extraordinary young people. I've been humbled and very proud to share the stage with you and to have you tell your story. So thank you all so much for visiting us and being a part of this.